He thinks I'm a little bit too tough and cynical about large corporations. But does he still think this? He sees the purpose of a corporation for what it is, and yet he treats his employees with great care and dignity. He got to go to his first concert when he was 16. I got to go when I was 15. That's because mom likes me more. Hello, I'm Michael Denisoff, CEO and Principal Director of Denisoff Consulting Group, an international consulting firm dedicated to elevating organizations to help them perform better, be more successful, and grow strong, high-performing cultures. And this is possible, but only if we're really honest about how corporations work. And welcome to this episode of Work Trauma, How Corporations Really Work, where we pull back the curtain to let you know what is really going on at companies so you can make good decisions about who you work for, how to navigate your career, and if you are a leader, how to build better, fairer, more successful organizations. On tonight's episode of Work Trauma, How Corporations Really Work, we meet Operations Executive Extraordinaire, my brother, Dan Dennisoff. All right, everybody, we have a special guest here tonight. He's an amazing person. He's okay. No, this is a great person. We have with us on the Work Trauma, How Corporations Really Work podcast, Dan Dennisoff. Yay, hooray, everybody. And if you notice that the last name sounds similar to my last name, it's because, yes, we are brothers. So I'm really excited to have him on. I really admire my brother, even though we don't say that enough as brothers. I do because he's super dedicated to his job, and I'll read his background in a moment. He's super dedicated to his job, but he's one of the few people I've met, particularly at the executive levels, that he just really loves his work. He loves to do great work. He loves the people that not only that he works for, but that work for him. And he's a pretty unique character, and I always admire that about him as well. There's a lot of things I don't admire about him. No, I'm just a brother. I just don't mean that. But I'm very excited to have you here, Dan, for sure. I want you to talk about your background in a bit, but I do want to talk a little bit about your background. Dan is big. He's an operations executive and leader. He's done some pretty incredible things in his life. Let me pull up his resume. He got his start. I remember you got your start at Pepsi. I think you were working part-time, and then before you know it, you were running the plant in upstate New York, correct?
Not in upstate, but I started loading trucks up in Albany, where we're from, Schenectady, Albany area. Yeah. I loaded trucks in the summer between high school and college, and eventually paid my way through college by working on the production line. I was a teamster when I was a kid, and then my original calling, if you remember, was to be a lawyer. And before I got out of college, I made it into management up at Pepsi in Albany, and it just changed the course of my life. I enjoyed operations. I did have a knack for it right from the beginning, so here I am. That's where it started. Loading a truck and cleaning some grains.
I love it. What I like about people like operations people like you, they just love their job. They love being in the plant. They love just being in the mix of it. Both at the tactical and the strategic level. All right, some more things about your background. I'm sure I'll miss some, so you can correct me. I know you were director of manufacturing at Austin Nichols Company, which was multi-plant, multi-million-dollar low-acid beverage manufacturing operation. You were also senior vice president at Pernod Ricard, USA, which is a big deal. I think that's the second largest spirits company in the world. You've consulted to a lot of different organizations, Revolution Foods, Aero Farms, Car Spirits, even Beauty Quest. It's pretty interesting as well. And you've done a lot of that. And I think right now you're the SVP of operations and hold on, one more thing to it. Operations
and capital
projects. That's right, because you're building quite a big facility and public facility in Myrtle Beach right now for Ole Smoky.
Yes, that's it.
So it's
been a nice ride. It's been a fun ride. I spent pretty much my entire life I've been putting liquid in bottles, starting with Pepsi, and then Austin Nichols, the little chocolate drink, if you ever had it, was Yoo-Hoo. So we used to make Yoo-Hoo.
That's right.
And then by a twist of fate and being in the right place, right time, I ended up working with Pernod Ricard when they did a big joint venture with Diageo. But it's funny when I was with Pernod early on, they were called Austin Nichols in the U.S. and it was a small company, about $250 million of sales. Half of that was the soft drinks, the Yoo-Hoo and Orangina, and the other half of that was Wild Turkey Bourbon, Canai wine, and at the time a very small brand of Irish whiskey called Jameson. And
Wow.
so I was supposed to move on to the guys that were buying Yoo-Hoo, and I didn't feel like I'd be a good fit. I found myself a new job and down in South Georgia. I was going to make salad dressing, which looking backward, I'm really glad that didn't happen. And one day I was talking to one of my boss was a guy from France, a really good guy, Jean-Pierre, and he says, well, I told him what was going on. He said, well, would you stay with us? I'm like, sure. And he says, so, well, you got to move. I was living back in New York at the time. And so I moved to Kentucky and that started my career in the spirits world. And that's where I've been really since about 2001 or so. I've been in spirits about 23, 24 years in the wine and spirit business.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, like you said, you've spent most of your career putting liquids in bottles, but I also know you're known to drink liquids out of bottles too, if I'm not mistaken.
Good bourbon out of a bottle makes it very wise. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. One more thing. Like I said before, I like what I really like about you is I know you like your work. I know I think if you can work at, when you're 90 or 100, you'll be doing something because I think you like it. When did you know that this was your thing? Did you know early on when you were at Pepsi, or when did it become something that you just kind of liked it?
Yeah, I've never felt like my job became my personality, or my job became my identity. But I also always liked what I did. I liked making things run. I feel like, some of it was intuitive. Like, before I learned Kaizen and way back when the Toyota system, which became lean and whatever, I kind of knew, I think you should take measures of things. I know that keeping a plant clean is important. I didn't know why, it just felt right. So I've always enjoyed it. And here I am, in my part of my life where some of my friends, especially guys who work for the state, are starting to retire. And it's not even on my radar. I mean, I can't imagine what I would do if I didn't go to work. And I like going to work. I like making things. I like the projects we do. And I feel now at this stage in my career, with the experience I have, I've been a manager for 40 years. And so to kind of give back a little bit. So working with the younger managers and to, hopefully develop my backfill in the next generation and help them, not make the mistakes I made. There's one of my favorite sayings is that, good judgment comes from experience, and experience, well, that comes from bad judgment. And so I'm trying to, where I can, help some of the younger managers not make some of the, mistakes that I've made in the past.
Brilliant. I love it. Which is good because I think you're pretty unique. Not all managers really strive for that. Some do, not all. And also real quick too, and I know even at Ole Smoky, you in a very short, so you've been there about 2 years. I know you had almost an immediate impact cleaning up the line, bringing in efficiencies, and having like $1 million improvements to the business. It's really impressive. Okay, so the other thing that you're going to know about Dan is great. So he sent me this note before we started today. He said, to be clear, it's not really a concern, but I should mention, I am not as nearly as cynical as you are about big corporations, which I love. I see people doing the best they can in environments that change at the speed of light and who have to answer to shareholders, board of directors, employees, and special interest groups. The job of an executive extraordinarily difficult. So I do want to, by the way, I do believe that. I think you have to have big shoulders to be a CEO or any executive. I just see so many of them doing it bad. But I thought that was a thoughtful comment. But I do want to follow up with this. To the contrary, my experience with startups show them as most inept and toxic. So I appreciate that. But I think that's very thoughtful. So again, I really work hard on the show to call out the insanity and name things that happen in corporations. Because a lot of these executives do make a lot of money. It is a hard job, but I've seen some crazy things. And you have told me some stories that kind of support my.
You guys can write a book. I can write a book. I think I do see though. I mean, it's the whole world rests on your shoulder. And again, and I think it's in some ways it's even more difficult now, right? Because who do we report to? Who do we support? And really, if it's a publicly traded corporation or even a PE. Your first customer is your shareholder, right?
Right.
And a lot of people don't want to say that. They want to be altruistic, say, well, it's the customer, the consumer, or even the employees. But no, the obligation is to the shareholder, and the shareholder wants result regardless of the headwinds, and right now we're in that in the spirit industry is, the whole industry, not just, Ole Smoky's doing actually outperforming the industry, but not doing what we did do. The whole industry's way down. And it's, you have things like, more health conscious people. You have GLP-1s are having an impact. You have in fact, this week, I think the World Health Organization, is trying to issue a statement that alcohol is not safe at any level, which, obviously none of us, believe that. And then you have Generation Z, who, for whatever reason, other than they're no fun, have really don't drink like we used to. So there's a lot of headwinds. So all that I'm saying is that everybody expects the business to perform well. And then and the shareholders, that's not only just the big guys, the investors, but that's any one of us and any people in your audience, I think, that has a 401k that they wanted to grow 11 or 12% every year. You want your stocks to grow. Well, for stocks to grow, businesses have to perform. And all that pressure comes back to the execs. Now, again, they don't walk on water. They're not, you're right, they're not all good, but it is more, I think you understand it, but not everybody understands the burden that's on an executive.
I love that you say it. It takes big shoulders, and it's a tough thing. But so you brought up something good. So if you listen to my podcast regularly, which you don't, because you don't have to, because we talk. I did the one episode about kind of the fallacy of mission statements. And granted, you can't have a mission statement that says our mission is to make shareholders rich, because that's not very inspiring. But it's almost to your point, like people, we don't want to bring it up, but that is a part of it. I think it would benefit companies to be honest with their employees. We do want to treat you well. We do want to treat employees, our customers, really well, and that's the best way to run a company. And it's better for our really big purpose, which is our main purpose is to take care of the shareholders. Like, could you ever see that messaging go out in a thoughtful way that wouldn't be cringy?
No, absolutely not. And that's a great point. But it's a fact of life, right? So the secret that nobody wants to talk about, right? And then, and beyond that, so you got the shareholders, and especially nowadays. And I think these younger people are smarter than we are to an extent. Like when I was growing up in the industry, man, like when I was with Pepsi, your blood ran blue. And when you go on vacation, you would leave your hotel number, you'd have your pager back then, you'd have cell phones. And they would use them, right? And the younger generation, I think they are smart enough. They do believe more in a work-life balance. So anyhow, but almost like now we're seeing, there was an article I pulled out today from the Wall Street Journal. It was interesting with Gen Z, which is a bit problematic because when it said the data shows that that based on what businesses need, the behaviors that people need in a business, and a mere 2% of the Generation Z members have the values that companies are looking for.
Yeah.
So it may have gone too far, where it was like, when I was a young manager, man, you'd work 90 hours a week and you still were only as good as the last good thing you did.
Yeah.
To this point where here, we're like, there's no loyalty, it's all about me. The first sign of adversity, they fold like a lawn chair. So we're dealing with that. When we recruiting people is a big issue. So you got one end, you got very powerful shareholders, but you also have very powerful employees, right? So
I love that. Yeah, no, I do. Matter of fact, I can't remember. She's a managing partner at Bain. She wrote an article, came out in Forbes this week. She said the majority of Gen Z sees corporations as the enemy. Right. Which, by the way, I there's part of me that says, well, that's not good because I'm an older generation. But part of me also says, well, the organizations have created so much toxicity through the years, they kind of deserve a little bit of that, or no, more than a little bit of that. But I do feel like the pendulum has swung so much the other way, it's untenable. But again, I think with the work trauma kind of point of view is, well, the corporations are kind of responsible for that to a reasonable degree. So I appreciate that. The other thing I would tell you about the Gen Zs, because I think technically you're a baby boomer. I'm Gen X. And we always say, baby boomers didn't even talk about work-life balance. Gen X talked about work-life balance. And now with the younger generation, millennials, it's really life-work balance. And Gen Z is just like life. Oh, yeah, work. So it's kind of an interesting thing,
Yeah,
for
if you
sure.
think of the generation before the boomer, because I'm in the tail end of the boomer, on the cusp of
With
Gen X.
X, right?
But the greatest generation, right, the ones before us, the World War II
Right.
people, the thought of, I mean, people live to live. I mean, and this is one thing that, like, especially American kids don't seem to understand, is that, and I mean, we're drifting a little bit, but it wasn't that long ago where you live to live. I mean, you didn't know, when the stock market crashed in 1928, there were no safety nets, no welfare, no. So you had to figure it out yourself. They did what they could do. We're not far removed from, like, not being able to feed your family all. That doesn't really exist. Not at least not in the States. And so they don't understand the idea of hardship the way, not that you and I had to, but at least we learned about it from our parents and our grandparents who did experience. So they don't know anything except waiting in line at Starbucks.
That's right. So hence we have the term first world problems.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Exactly.
All right. So next I want to ask you a little bit about you. So this is called work trauma. I may have shared this with you. I got the name of the program because I was dealing with a new coaching client, and I asked him to introduce himself, and he said, "Well, I've been working for 30 years in the corporate world, so like everybody, I have a good measure of work trauma," and hence the name was coined for this podcast. But for you, you have wonderful stories. Do you have any recollections of a work trauma, something that happened to you that was just kind of insane and inane? And, how'd you handle that? And what did you do with it? And what was that story about? I'd be curious.
Again, I mean, I'm trying to think of anything specific. I said, all in all, I have not much to complain about. Again, I've worked with some real jerks. I've worked with some wonderful people. I think where I've really been blessed is with the few exceptions, I've always had a great mentor. Right from the beginning, I always had somebody that I could look up to. I always had somebody who took me under the wing. Like when I went to when Pernod Ricard bought Seagram's with the JV with Diageo, we took Seagram's. Now Seagram's was a huge company, and I guess you could probably do a story about workplace trauma with them on their generation completely destroyed it. Which is, what you hear so much is, the grandfather builds it, the father makes it rich, and the son, in this case, decides he doesn't want to be spirits business, decides he wants to be in the motion picture business, and, totally destroys one of the most iconic names in the history of the spirit world. But it was interesting when I went there, though, is the Seagram's world was, not far from, your part of the world, the Midwest Valley, a lot of that, all engineers, all very smart, but it was very insulated. Everything they did was invented there. And the idea for them to, look outside for help or ideas really was really hurt them towards the end. I mean, the world passed them by. They were like an old boxer where they just didn't have the punch they used to. And so when I went in there, I didn't have any spirit experience at the time. I was working for a French company. I was an outsider from New York. So I had absolutely nothing going for me. But when I got there, and again, these guys went around the room they call them the class. So they had like the class of 72, and everybody in the class of 72 had been there 30 years. Wow. Right. And, when I was at Pepsi, I was a plant manager at Pepsi, my entire staff collectively didn't have 30 years. So it was, went from one place, went for all kind of churn to a place that nobody ever left. And what really got me through it, because, at the end of the day, you're putting, I didn't know anything about distillation, but I knew about putting stuff in bottles. And I would say, I can't play a piano, but I know when one's out of tune. And that really pissed them all off. But thank God I had a boss, his name was Danny, and he went by Danny, and he knew it, he saw it, he was again a lifeline, and he protected me. And I learned one by one. I won them over, and really that's what started my career with in Pernod, because then I went in as kind of like an AVP, not knowing what I was going to do. They just, you got to be our person there, and I ended up, because of that job and because of the improvements we made there, I ended up running the whole United States for it was about a $3 billion business. So it was interesting. So again, as I had a very insular group, really resistant to change, And then got had one person that kind of had my back.
Because if you didn't have that one person, it would have been a nightmare.
I would have failed. I would have never made it, But I've always had the one guy that it seems like that looked out for me. And even at Ole Smoky, our current CEO, actually is retired now. It's just taught me, even this late in my career, I learned something from him every day. Nice. And so again, I try to do that thing. I think not as much as being a manager as being a coach. We coach and we lead. Managing is just mechanical, but inspiring people, holding people accountable, pushing people to do better. Making leaders is the job of a leader. And and so I think I've taken that approach and it's helped. And I really do focus on the team. When I came to Ole Smoky, it was Ole Smoky grew. They were my first customer when I started consulting. 6 years after I left Pernod Ricard, and they were doing 200,000 cases a year. When I finally went back, like 5 years later, they were doing 1.3 million. So they grew 6x in 5 years. They were building a facility. And I used to liken it to flying an airplane building an airplane while you're still flying it. I mean, it was hard. It was really hard. And again, they had it back. So first thing I did when I took over, my very first slide that I showed the management team, showed the board. And I said, if we're going to do this right, we're going to have to do some things with people in terms of talent and in terms of salary. To be honest with you, and so I said, my first slide was it starts with the people. And they bought into that. And I was able to bring in seasoned individuals at the director level. And really over the last 2 years, we have light years to go, but we've come light years. And it's all because of the having the right people. So again, when you have that kind of support, you're not quite as cynical. But I will tell you, am I talking too much, Mike? I don't know.
No, you're great. Doing great. I love it.
So before I came here, I won't mention the company. I was working in Romania. How I ended up at Ole Smoky, because I'd been consulting, I had never thought I'd be consulting as long as I did. I thought I would just do it in between jobs, and then and then it just I never was that busy, and it was great because I got to work outside the industry as well. I did you mentioned beauty supply, I did food for inner city schools. I worked at a lithium battery company in LA for a while, but my last gig was. I was working in a spirit company in Romania, and I was going back and forth there a couple of weeks every month. And I nicely as I could put it, the guy who ran the company was like less than honest, and there were some things going on that I could not compromise my values for, and I called a friend of mine and a mentor, who guy used to be our corporate attorney for Pernod, told him what was going on. He says, "Hey, Dan," he says, "you got to go." He says, "You got to get out of there." And,
of course.
And he says, if they go down, you're going to be the scapegoat, or you're going to go down with them. And so I did. So I took his advice. I gave this one up to God, and I gave him a 30 days notice. And so anyhow, through a couple of people I know, I called the guy who's now my boss, our CEO. And I said, a week later, he called me back. And he said that I was driving in the car, and he says, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, not a whole lot." And he said, "Well, I got something for you." And, a 6-month job, and then 9-month job. And then, here I am. I love it. This is my last rodeo. I'll probably, so that's I think
it's brilliant. Okay, I got to ask a question because of the work term part. When you were working with this Romanian plant operation,
Romaniac is what I call it.
Romania. There you go. How did that impact your life?
It didn't. I mean, again, I think 10 or 20 years ago, I would have freaked out. I may have overreacted. Maybe would have tried to fight City Hall. Well, this time it was again. This is what happens when you get professional maturity. Is I knew what was wrong, so I didn't do anything that violated my values, and certainly wouldn't break any laws. Where it kind of hamstrung me a bit was he never paid anybody, so like it kind of hurt me because I always had good resources. Like we had a question, I'd have somebody, and I know that if I got somebody to do work for him, I was pretty sure he would never pay him. And so it affected me in the sense that it was harder for me to do my job effectively. I pushed back, but I realized, there was no reasoning with this person. Some people, you can manage up and they'll listen.
Yep.
No, and he was vindictive. I remember one day he was, one of the union guys was mad, and he like shut the plant down for, he was just a really not a nice person. So I guess the worst, hardest thing is as you get older, you worry about, can I find another job? But I felt like, with the spirit industry at that time, we hit a wall this last year or so. At that time was going like this. I felt, well, with my skill set and my experience, it'd be something.
Good time to jump. Yeah. Good for you. Good for you for making that decision and not being around that. And good for your mentor for telling you, kind of giving you the final push to move on, which turned out to be great for sure. That wraps up part 1 of today's episode of Work Trauma, How Corporations Really Work, and my interview with Dan Denisoff, which was interesting because he's a thoughtful leader and he's also my brother. But join us next week for part 2 as we continue the conversation and hear about Dan's take on work trauma and the inner workings of corporations. Until then, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time.